Hello, everybody. As the title of the video says, I'm talking now about the theoretical framework. Someone has asked me to talk in more details about it. So, this video is about the theoretical framework and research writing, particularly in the field of translation and linguistics. In fact, this is the field that I work with, so I thought that I could just have something to say about it. Basically, there is a lot of things that you can see in the internet about the theoretical framework. And the question is, what happens to you when you read something about the theoretical framework in the literature and try to understand it? What kind of difference that I can make in this video? What kind of addition that I can make to those stuff that you can find on the internet everywhere? And many scientists talked about it, many scholars, many books. The difference that I am thinking about is the following. Now, as a researcher, you read lots of things and you find conflicting views, you find abstract ideas, and sometimes we find ourselves really at odds and we find ourselves completely lost and we don't really understand at the end what theoretical framework is. So basically, I thought that I could share my experience with you and my thought as well. Probably it's going to be helpful to you. And I would like to encourage at the same time other researchers to write about the same thing or to talk about the same thing so that we can share experience in this way and try to be helpful for each other. Theoretical framework in writing, particularly in dissertations, is a very important issue. It is important not because I'm saying it's important or people are saying that's important, but it's because this is one of the issues that usually reviewers try to cite in their criticism of a research paper or dissertation, sometimes leading to the unfortunate result of rejection or my major comments, maybe in the best scenario. So, what is my thought about it? And I hope that you are going to make benefit out of all of this. Now, in order for me to explain the theoretical framework, I have to fill in the gap on something that I feel exists in the minds of researchers. Not all researchers, but those who are like me at the beginning of the research, and lots of gaps there, lots of problems, lots of misunderstandings. So please bear with me because I will start from something which might be a bit not easy to understand, but I would like to be as much clear as possible. And if you have any question, please do ask me in the comments so we can discuss them furthermore. And I would like to meet also with researchers to see if they share with me the same ideas or not. So basically, let's talk about it. You have a research about something, and suddenly you come to the problem of trying to understand what a theoretical framework is, and you feel stuck. Usually, the questions that I usually see by researchers is what is the difference between theoretical framework and literature review? And what's the difference between theoretical framework and conceptual framework? And there is also another question, which is that even if I understand the theoretical framework, I work on it, and suddenly in my research, I feel that I'm not happy with that theoretical framework. And the basic answer to this is another question. Is the theoretical framework a construct that is static, that doesn't change at all? Or is it a draft theoretical framework that can evolve as you proceed further with the research or can change, drastically change, if we discover that it doesn't work at all, for example? We'll try to see these questions. In order to understand the theoretical framework, I need to discuss with you the issue of philosophy. Philosophy sometimes is very difficult to understand, sometimes. But I believe that this is my own belief is that if we understand philosophy, we will find it easier to understand research writing and scientific experiments and other things. We try to understand philosophy in order to understand those things that came from philosophy in the first place. So bear with me because I'm going to take you to a specific tour on some philosophical ideas before we talk about theoretical framework, because when I talk about the issue of this video, I have to make reference to them. So please bear with me. Let's talk about the first one. The first thing that comes into my mind is what a research is about. And the first thing that crosses my mind at this moment when I talk about scientific research, it is honesty. It is honesty. You have to find a specific piece of information that is new to people or to explain something to them, and you have to be honest. This is what I understand from scientific research. It is honesty. This is the first thing that crosses my mind about it. Now, in order to be honest in our research and to give good results and to show people that we are making a contribution to civilization, we have to be honest and we have to tell the truth and nothing but the truth. And this is the problem. How can we make sure that we tell the truth all the time? In scientific research, as well as in philosophy, this isn't a straightforward exercise. Let me now give you examples because many people are looking for examples in order to understand these concepts. Let me give you this example. The example is somebody came to you and asked you, I want to migrate to another country because that country is very rich and it has lots of opportunities. Somebody came to you and asked you this. What do you think about it? What's the advice that you give to that person? You suddenly say to him, believe me, this is wrong. Now, look at this expression, believe me. Believe me is not an argument. Believe me is as if you're saying to him, I don't have anything convincing to convince you for sure, and to be very honest with you, to persuade you, to convince you that migrating to another country is not something good. So you see, these are the basic things that we say in everyday life. We look at them philosophically speaking and from scientific research, and we find ourselves many times, on multiple occasions, we find ourselves not truthful and not honest. For example, you go to a shop and ask him, I want to buy a chocolate, and he says it is $1. You say, come on, it is too much expensive. Everybody else in the world sells it at half a dollar. Now, everybody sells it at half a dollar in the world as well. We're saying this is not truthful. It is not honest because you cannot simply say everybody unless you have information telling you that really it is everybody. It's everybody. So these are the issues that we have to consider in research writing. We have to be truthful and honest, and we have to suspect everything that we're saying. Otherwise, it will be a problem. Why it's going to be a problem? Because if I make these hasty generalizations about things and make them accumulate and build up, what happens at the end? Error begets error only. That's the only thing that will happen. So honesty is number one in the scientific research. And theoretical framework is going to lead us to this, solving this problem of honesty, and I will discuss it later on. So the first thing, as I said, is honesty. You have to be honest with yourself. In philosophy, we talk about things, what they are, and what is the property of things, and this is called an ontology. Ontology, we try to understand the properties of things and entities and beings and try to see the relationship between them, whether they exist or not, what kind of relationship exists there. And we also cite also the philosophy of epistemology. Epistemology is how to learn things about us around the world. What is the source of knowledge? And we have also phenomenology, which is how to describe reality as it is, as a phenomenon, in other words. Anyway, aside from these philosophical inquiries, I would like just to say an example here. It is how do you know that if you heat water, it boils, and if it boils, evaporates? Well, you don't really need to make an experiment in order to know that because it's already known. But it is already known because many people before you made this experiment. And many people before us did that experiment and they wrote it and they were truthful in making those observations about what happens to water when it boils, it evaporates. So these experiments, in fact, have been done throughout history to the extent that it is impossible for us or not reasonable for us to say that everybody there was a liar. So this is how we can safely say that if you heat water, it boils, and if it boils, it evaporates at certain degrees. It's not because something is taken for granted, but it is because that many people did that experiment before and understood the properties and explained the properties of water and how it evaporates, etc., and made the result available to us. So we say, to the best of our knowledge, yes, if you heat water, it evaporates after a specific degree. Look at this here. Some people made just the experiment, and they said we made the experiment many times and repeated many times under the same conditions, and we got the same result. This is one. We asked other people to do the same experiment about boiling water, and they had the same what? The same result. So experiment is one source of knowledge, but it's not the only source of knowledge. Other people would say, I don't care about experiments, or I'm not interested in experiments. I'm interested in the, as I would say, the ontology, the what it is. So some people came and said, let us look at water. They looked at the molecules of water, the composition of water, what happens to the water, and they started to see the bonds in the hydrogen and oxygen, and started to see that there is a kind of temperature that would break up these bonds, and this is why they change into vapor, so that the water evaporates a specific degree. So we have now two things. We have the experiment on the one hand, but we have also the other thing, which is the ontology. In other words, understanding the properties of the matter that makes water boil. You see that I'm talking now is philosophy. What I'm talking now is something that that's really interesting, because it is something that we have taken for granted for a long time, but we still, as researchers, have to understand how this knowledge came to us. How this knowledge came to us. In previous videos, I discussed these issues, but now I will give you more examples, because we're talking about theoretical framework and we need more information about it with more examples. Let's have another example. Why do you use a car? You use a car in order to get to your work, to your house, etc., to go somewhere, to hang out somewhere in the mall. Transportation. Why things happen the way that they happen, it's called teleology. It is what is the purpose of things and how things happen, why they happen in the way that they happen. What are they designed for? So the car is designed for transportation. This is one example. So we understand also the logic behind the why things happen in the way that they happen. This is another thing that we have to take into consideration. I encourage you to read more about this philosophical inquiry, of course. But for the time being, let's move forward. And please remember that I'm talking about these philosophical issues because they are going to be very important for us to understand the theoretical framework later on. Now let's talk about something else. When we talk about the teleology, about ontology, and we talked about the source of knowledge in epistemology. Source of knowledge. In the previous videos, we talk about one way of starting to make knowledge, understand knowledge, is observation. So today you look at the sun and you find it rising at a specific time from a specific place. And tomorrow you find that it rises again the same way, the same place. So you try to build a hypothesis and say that, well, probably the sun rises from the east. And then what happens is that you try to follow the pattern to see, does it keep repeated every time? People in history did this observation, and they find at the end of the day that a specific day, a specific time, there would be the sun rising from a specific place. So what do they say about that place? What do they say about that place? They say we call that place east. We call it east. Now, they came with the following conclusion. The conclusion came out of observation seen by many people across time, and they found that it doesn't change, it follows a pattern. So they say this is knowledge that we can feel comfortable with, that the sun rises from a place, and we call this place east. We call it east. So we call it east. But there is a problem. One day I was reading in a book about physics, and they say that the sun doesn't rise from the east. How does it come? We've always learned that it rises from the east and we can see it ourselves. Well, he said no, because the magnetic east is slightly different from the east that we know. For that reason, the sun doesn't rise from the east. So, what's the problem here? The problem is that myself and the other person who's saying that we are not going to reach an agreement at all. Simply because I insist no, it rises in the east because I see the direction, the geographical direction. The other person says no because I'm using the compass and I'm seeing the magnetic field. It doesn't rise in the east. And it goes on for ages if we continue with this argument, simply because we're basing our understanding and discussion between us on different terminology. So, in order for us to fix this problem, I can say, let's decide on the definition of east. Let's say geographical location. East is a geographical location. I would say now the sun rises from the geographical location called east. The other person would say, well, I agree with you. So there is no difference between us. Now let's do the other way around. If it is magnetic east, if the east is a magnetic east, it is the location that is pointed to by a compass or whatsoever. I'm not a physical person. I'm not a physicist, so I don't know if this is true or not. It's something that I read in the book. So we would say, yes, I agree with you and you agree with me that it is not directly rising from the magnetic east. Terminology. Terminology is very important. In order for me to convey to you as a researcher results that you understand, there has to be fixed terminology. I have to use the same terms that you use. If you don't use those terms, I have to say to you, I'm going to write my research about the following issue, and here are the terms that I use, and here is the meaning of every single term that I am using. Long time ago, there was a person, philosopher called Francis Bacon. Francis Bacon said, there are idols to the mind, idols of the mind. Idols, in other words, something, obstacles that are preventing us from making good arguments and judgments. What are they? He said there is, for example, the idol of the marketplace. How to understand the marketplace idol? It is like that I use my own terminology, you use your own terminology, two different definitions, and I say about something, you say about something, we don't agree. Just like the example that I gave you about the yeast. It's the same that you go to a shop, by the way. You go to the shop and say, I want a can of tuna can, for example. He says, yes, I have lots of fish. Fish. He says, yes, fish is the same as tuna. No, I want just a can of tuna fish. No, I have fish. So you see, the terminology is different. For that reason, we don't understand. There's also a famous story about orange, that two people are quarreling with each other on the orange. The first one says, I want the orange. And the second one says, no, I want the orange. And then after discussions, they find out that the first person wants the crest of the orange, not the orange itself. And the second one wants the juice of the orange. So these are differences in the terminology. This is from the idol of the marketplace. When terminology is different, we will not be able to communicate our thoughts properly. People will not understand us as well. Sorry. Now, what happens in theoretical framework, we discuss it later on, is that we need to be very specific in the terms that we talk about. Let's have another example. I want to study a phenomenon or an issue of mastery of grammar among translation students. And I say, My research is going to be about the competence of students in using grammar in translation. That's fine. But you, as a viewer now at the moment, you're asking yourself, what kind of student are you talking about? And I'm saying to you, no, student. You say, no, I need to understand who student you're talking about. If I say now, all students failed in the grammar test, you will be surprised and say, probably you're going to be surprised to say, what do you mean by students failed? All students failed? I don't understand it. And then I said, no, I'm talking about a specific group of students that I met last week, and they were just 4 or 5 people. Okay, now this is a very big difference here. So we're talking about some group of people. I call them a student, and those students are studying translation in the third year, maybe, and they are in a specific university or whatsoever. And those people, I gave them a test and they failed. So you say, now I understand what you say. You see, the terminology is very important. Terminology is also important in order to avoid the idol of the marketplace in more advanced studies, and not only advanced studies, even a basic study, you need to make it very clear from the very beginning that you are using specific terms. I'll come back to this later on when discussing the theoretical framework. There is the idol of the cave. The idol of the cave. Now, imagine yourself to be in a cave, and this cave is closed. It's dark. What do you see? And this is the same as Plato's cave, maybe. What do you see? You don't say we see nothing. We see something. But imagine that the things that you see in that cave, you believe that it's reality and nothing else exists in the world. So let me give you an example. As a teacher, I come with my own thoughts and teach students. And I, for example, was influenced by a professor maybe, let's say, 40 years ago. And whenever you talk to me about something, you say, can we talk about the directionality theory? I say, no, don't take it. Can we talk about the scopus theory? No, David. Don't take it. It's useless. Nothing like this will help you. And I would say, I will take the theory of XYZ. And this is the theory that works, and this is the best theory in the world. You see that I am now enslaving myself. I am now putting myself in a cave and seeing nothing except only one thing. And the small thing that I see is reality for me. It's like a cave. Now imagine this. You are in a cave and you have a candle. It's dark. What do you see? Probably you can see shadows. So you look at the shadows and you say that all life is made of shadows, and shadows is reality. Of course, when you go outside the cave, there is no shadow usually, except when there is a sun, and you find lots of shadows, but you find also lots of objects and lots of things that enlighten your mind. And you believe at that moment that what you say, what you saw in the cave, yes, it's true that there are shadows inside the cave, but outside the cave, reality suddenly changes in your mind. This is called the idol of the cave, where you are just restricted to specific thought that is in your mind, and you, it happens that you can't see reality except in this cave. In your daily interaction, look at people talking to you. Look how many times you feel very unhappy with people talking to you, and you say they are stubborn. They are stubborn. They wouldn't listen to me. They wouldn't listen to me. They wouldn't listen to so and so. One of the reasons is that they see reality only from that perspective, from the cave, only from the cave that they have. But if they get enlightened, probably if they allow themselves to receive the light of knowledge, they can change to the better. And maybe they can just improve their thoughts about it that they had in the cave, but also sometimes they change everything. This is called the idol of the cave. There is also idol of the tribe. You're living in a village. It's the same like a cave, but a big one. You're living in a village and you have your own traditions about do or don'ts, etc. And in the village that you live, there is a rule which says, for example, that boys, this is just hypothetical, boys cannot leave home before 9 o'clock. And suddenly, you go to the city and you find people playing in the street or going to school boys and girls, at 7 o'clock. And you say, no, 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 this is wrong, this is wrong, this is wrong. Why is it wrong? This is wrong because it is wrong. Because this is not the way that we lived in the village, because the way that we lived in the village is ideal, is true. This is what we learned from our ancestors, and we will not going to change it. And everybody has to change his lifestyle because that we are following a different one. This is the idol of the tribe, that you are restricting your mind to specific traditions, to specific things about the world around you, and you're not understanding that, you fail to understand that other people have their own lifestyles as well, but you just overlook all other people's lifestyle, not because of any judgment or because of any argument that you have, but because simply this is not something that your ancestors did. This is one of the fallacies in philosophy anyway. So let's think about these issues, and I would like to encourage you to read more about the idols of the marketplace and the tribe and the cave of Francis Bacon. There are four idols that he mentioned. And I would like to encourage you more to read about philosophy in order to get more enlightenment about the issue. Once again, don't forget, I'm talking about the theoretical framework, but I felt it's very important to talk about philosophical issues. Sources of knowledge as well from epistemology. I would like to talk now about two sources that are very useful, probably useful. The first one is to use your mind and to say, if I take money from my bank, and put it in my pocket and walk, and if I drop the money by mistake, I lose it, I feel sad. So you say, in order for me not to be sad, I have not to withdraw money from the bank. This kind of argument could have a fallacy there. It could be true, by the way, or could be false. But this is a kind of argument that you're making inside your mind about procedural steps that each one follows the other logically, so that you can get a conclusion. In our example, if you always, every day, you withdraw money from the bank, or you have money in your pocket and lose it every day, then it gives us some kind of understanding why you say that I will never withdraw money from the bank, because I will lose it on the way. However, we have to understand also that you can still withdraw money from the bank inside the bank without walking and giving instantly to another person. So your argument is that if you withdraw money from the bank, this will make you sad, is not a good argument. It is based on a kind of fallacy. Otherwise, if you make the deduction in the right way about specific issue, and I'm not going to talk about deductions now, then you will reach a better solution and something convincing to people. It's like, for example, if I beat somebody, he cries. And if you notice that this happens every time with beating people, then you say, I don't want to make people cry, so I don't want to beat them. I don't want to harm them. This is a kind of good deduction that you can make, but it's also based on the philosophy of ethics that I'm not going to discuss now. So deduction is very important, and it's something that you are going to use in your research. There is also now the experiments. Some people say that in order for us to understand reality, first of all, we try to make a hypothesis and to make some testing. For example, that I mentioned just a few moments ago, it's about students. You notice as a translator, and this is something that happened to me, by the way, all over the years, basically since 1999 until this moment, when I receive works from students to correct as translators, I find that they have mistakes in grammar. So over the years, I saw this is observation, and I cannot say that I haven't seen that. I found this observation, which is problems in their writing, in grammar, in translation. So I build a hypothesis, and the hypothesis is that there is a problem with the students at a specific grade level, or maybe at the university or translation students. I make a hypothesis that probably all students have this problem here, or the majority of students have problem. This is hypothesis. I'm not saying that this is true. I say probably. It's probability. And then I try to find experiments. So I make a test and apply this test at a group of people, and then get results, and then I apply it at another group, etc., etc. And then I can see the results, analyze the results, and see what they mean. But the question is how to choose this group and how to make this test. I will discuss it later on, because we do not want to base our arguments on the fallacies that I am just saying that they are not good for scientific research. In philosophy again, and remember that I'm going to talk later on about theoretical framework. I hope that you pause if you like. You can pause the video and try to understand everything I said before you proceed forward. But this is just the last thing that I would like to talk about philosophy. It is casuistry. Casuistry appeared in the Middle Ages. There were courts, judges, and they were ruling some kind of cases. What the judge does, this is something that we're not legal people. For that reason, we don't understand maybe this point. The judges do the following usually. They listen to you, listen to other person for a dispute. And first of all, he tries to see the facts. Once he establishes the facts, once he makes sure that this is what happened, he listens to you, the other person, and then he says, I listen to you, I listen to that person, and now I can say the facts happened in this way. And he says, don't talk to me about it anymore. This is, I'm sure, these are the facts. Then he tries to use deductions, inference, and tries to analyze the facts that he has seen. After the analysis, which takes a long time maybe, which takes lots of efforts in order to reach honesty, he finds a decision. He makes a decision after he says, I discovered this, and this leads to that, and that leads to so and so, etc. So that now I can make sure that I make a good judgment. Obviously, this is a very laborious attempt or decision to be taken by the judge. The judge takes a long time to do it. So casuistry, some people came with this thought. They said, instead of every judge repeating the same process again, over and again, over and again, by making deductions, in new cases, people said, if today we have a case that is very similar to a case that happened yesterday or last year or whatsoever, we look at the people who ruled on those cases and try to benefit from them instead of repeating the whole process again. This is casuistry in legal discourse. So what happens is that if I give you a check and I do not honor this check, you go to the judge, and the judge establishes this fact. So instead of the judge trying to make reasoning or try to make some kind of inference to see what he does, he just checks in his notebook and he tries to see what previous judges did before on this case, based on reason, based on good arguments, and he applies the same reasoning immediately without having to reinvent the wheel. Once again, if you have more questions about casuistry, please read about it in philosophy and you can find it. So these are the main thoughts that I wanted to discuss with you in terms of philosophy, and now we go to the theoretical framework. In order for me now to talk about the theoretical framework, I will have an example, and from this example we can proceed forward in order to answer the question what the theoretical framework is and what's its relationship with other parts of the study. Now, the case that I want to present to you is the following. First of all, from 1999 until this moment, I have received lots of translation work by students. and found lots of problems in terms of grammar, in terms of writing, etc. And I built a hypothesis. It is the fact that students of translation seem to be not good in using grammar in English, in translation from Arabic into English. What do I want to do now? I want to do the following. First of all, I want to understand what the problem is, the ontology, and I want to understand why this problem happens, and I want to understand what things can we do in order to solve this problem. So basically you have a problem, and what's the problem is that students are making mistakes in translation, mistakes, particularly in grammar. Now, is it a serious problem? I use my mind and say, well, yes, it could be a serious problem because of grammar. Grammar is very important, and when you deliver something which is problematic in a grammar, it's not going to work in translation. Now, I have to be honest with myself. Is this my own opinion? Yes, it is my own opinion. We cannot use it. We cannot use it. In order, first of all, to refine the problem and to make sure that I understand the problem correctly and to be honest with the people who are reading my research, one way of trying to find the significance of this problem, the severity of this problem, is to do some kind of just observation or just kind of analysis, just kind of understanding reality from other people's perspectives. So I discussed this issue with many translators, with many companies. Now, the majority of them, to tell the truth, if not all, well, I think I can say all the people that I met at least, said to me, if there is a grammar mistake in translation, I cannot give it to my client. Because if I give it to my client, he will refuse it and he will not pay me any money. And there will be some kind of lawsuits in the court, problems, and I cannot accept any work that has grammar mistake. So let's refine the problem. Some students, this is the hypothesis, right? Because I found only some students. Some students, I noticed that they are making grammar mistakes. Those students are studying translation. And I'm just refining the problem. If those students graduate from the university and do not improve the grammar skills that they have, then they will work in translation, maybe they work as translators, they make mistakes, and the companies are not going to hire them. If they are hired by the companies, they will be maybe fired, or there will be consequences if they make these mistakes, because the clients are not going to be happy. So you see, I am trying to understand the problem. I haven't got a full understanding of the problem, but it's still something clear to me that there is a problem. I have to be honest and say here, I am not going to rush into judgments. I'm not going to say that what I am saying is true. I'm going just to say that these are the deductions that I have made in my mind. Now I need to make sure that my deductions are true or false. In order for me to understand whether I am making good deductions or not, I have to do the following. First of all, I have to refine the problem more. And second, I have to look into the experience of other people. This is what I say. Because even in philosophy, it says that when you get as much information as possible about something, the best thing that you can get and the best efforts that you are putting, then you can be comfortable that what you're telling is true or close to truth. You can be comfortable at least that it's going to be a research. So refining the problem. I would say, first of all, I will see the level of those students. This is just my suggestion. And I found that those students are at the second year of the translation departments. And I try to refine it further and ask myself the questions. This is ontology in philosophy once again. Who are those students? What are the qualities of those students? Where do they come from? What is the demographics of them? What is the age? Where do they come from? And I try to see some commonalities between them. Do they belong to the same university? If they belong to the same university, does this problem that I see in 4 or 5 students happen with all other students inside the same university? Or probably those problems can change from one university to another. Interestingly, as I was a teacher, I used to teach translation for a long time. It's really interesting for me that a group of students from X university would show specific qualities that are commonly shared by those students from that university. In translation, I'm talking, of course. And other university, when I go to another university, I found other qualities. So this is a hypothesis I can make. Is there any pattern here that some universities are different from each other in terms of the qualities of translation students that they have? And I'm talking about qualities as they appear in the translation exercise. And then I try to see, of course, it's Arabic into English. This is my specific problem. And let's say that I'm going to see this kind of university and try to see if other students have the same problem. But how do I know that really they have those problems, the other students? How do I approach those students? How do I make sure that I am testing them in order to find this, to make sure that the problem exists or not? So students that I am met have problems in grammar when they translate from Arabic into English. And I want to see other students, if they have the same problem or not inside that university. I have to focus on the problem as well to refine it more and to try to see any kind of distortions, to remove those impurities in the research. And I have to be honest with myself. Is it really that those students do not understand the grammar so that they are making mistakes? Or maybe when I gave them the test in translation, probably the test did not measure, wasn't appropriate to measure their mastery of grammar. Probably there was something in my research question, in my research problem. Probably the issue was there in the way that I looked at the problem. For that reason, I have to be honest with myself. So I have to question not only the hypothesis, but the reason that made me build this hypothesis. It is just I gave them a text and they made mistakes in grammar. Probably somebody just forgot the S with the third person singular verb. Probably somebody just wasn't accustomed to writing. So I have maybe to make sure that they really understand grammar or they don't understand grammar. I have to rerun the test from a different perspective. And this is a question, what should I do? How can I be honest here? And here I feel stuck. What should I do? How can I make sure that really those students who exhibited problems in grammar do not understand grammar and we have a problem to be solved? Anyway, the other question is how to make sure that all other students are demonstrating the same problems or not. Let's talk now about a practical issue. As a researcher, if you go now to the university and try to take the input from students and try to see whether they make mistakes or not, and consider it practically, you have to take approvals, you have to arrange for time, and you can do the test or whatever intervention that you're going to have only once. What happens if after you do everything, you discover there was a mistake? Well, you cannot rely on the results. Everything is wasted. For that reason, we need a theoretical framework. For that reason, we have to choose a very solid background about what we talk about, the research problem. So you specified the problem that, yes, those students are demonstrating lots of problems in grammar from Arabic into English when they translate. What you need to know is to understand why this is happening. And second, what can you offer in order to prevent this problem from exacerbating and to solve this problem for those students? So these are the things that you have to consider. Let's assume that you really found by certain tests that yes, this is true. They are making problems because they don't understand grammar, and you want to understand why this is happening and what's the solution. Before jumping into the university to see the curriculum there, to see what the problems of the teachers, the students, just get back and think about it in a different way. Remember, we talked about casuistry, and I will apply it here and say, what you do first of all is to stop, not to go any further beyond observation. You made this observation that there are problems, stop. What you do is to do what we call literature review. Literature review is to try to see what other researchers did, because a previous researcher did lots of experiments, a previous researcher did lots of observations and had his work peer reviewed. So it is the best thing that we have. By reviewing literature about a specific problem, you try to see, very honestly, try to see what other people contributed to solving this problem. And you try to apply what they said, because this is the best that we have. When you go to the literature review, and this is going to take a lot of time on your behalf, what you do is to try to see answers to the following questions. How did other researchers face the same problem? If yes, how similar the problem was with the problem that you are facing at the moment? And what is the context? What are context and what are the conditions and the environments where these problems happened? And what are the solutions that they proposed? So you try to see as many researchers as possible and try to read a lot and a lot and a lot. Every time you read something, you discover that your problem hasn't become maturely dealt with. And you find yourself that, no, I'm going to go back to my problem statement and try to refine it. Because you find in literature people talking about students in Poland. So you go back to your problem statement and say, okay, my problem is not for students of translation in general, but students of translation in a specific country. Then you read other people talking about cities, and you make it specific in cities. Some people, you find people talking about the problem in the 1980s, and you say, well, I'm not going to apply what we have in the 1980s if it is just specific for a given period of time. I'm here in 2022. But you start to think about it. Are you going to compare the performance of students of translation, those who graduated in 1980s and those who graduate in 2022? So here you try to think about it differently. You try to see, probably I can see the timeline, if there is any change in the performance of students and competence of grammar. And you try to see if there is any difference between the ages, between the years. And you ask yourself here about the question, do I have the resources? Do I have the resources? When you read in literature more, you find a researcher who said that he met, for example, with professors. Are you able to see professors? Some person would say, I surveyed 100 translation companies. Are you able to survey 100 translation companies? Another person would say that he ran a test all over the country, including thousands of people and students. Are you able to do that? When you read in the literature, you not only understand your problem better, you not only define it better, but you see your own limitations. And you see that all people, researchers around the world, did those experiments that were very expensive and took a lot of time of efforts, something that you cannot do. For that reason, you say, well, in this way, I have to be modest in my problem statement and I have to narrow it down and down and down. So before even talking about your theoretical framework, my friend, it's very important, first of all, to understand your problem, as I say, to make hypotheses about it, to discuss it with people, and then to read in literature in order to refine your problem again and again and again. Now, let's assume that you read in the literature lots of things and you still did not find answers to your question. You still do not find answers why this problem is happening with those students in your country, in this city, in this university. And you feel that there's something very different from them. This is one. Second, you may feel that the methods that they have made, the researchers, is not something that you can apply to your students. And maybe you can think, maybe I have a better method. This is number two. Three, maybe the same problem was dealt with elsewhere in a way that applies to you, or you feel that it's really applicable to you, or you feel that probably it can apply to you as a solution. And they have a method. And you can say, what if I use the same method that is used by another researcher on my students that I'm going to interview or talk to or test? What happens? Do I have similar results or not? If I have similar results, I can talk to that researcher, for example, or to the researchers community and say, look, I have tested the tool or the method of so and I have found that it served the purposes and I got the results similar to what he got. So we can use this tool, this method for other research. Now here, what you find in the literature is what we call the gap. What is the gap in literature? Literature review, by the way, is not a kind of summary. It's not just to provide a summary of who said what, etc. It's a critical understanding of the theory. It's what we call backward looking. You look at how people addressed the problem in the past and try to see two things. What benefit can you make out of this literature, and what things you can add to the literature? So, in our example, you find researchers talking about the same problem that happened in their country, and you find that you can use their own research, you can use their own tools to try them in your own context. So this is the first thing. Second, which is more important as well, is that you find that none of them have talked about the specific issue that you are facing in your own country, and you feel that you have to deal with this issue. So this is something new, novelty in other words, something new, something hasn't been done before. So once again, you look in the literature to see the methods they have chosen, you see the similarities between your context and their context, and you see what kind of things you can benefit from them. This is number one. Number two, you try to see if your problem is addressed properly in the literature or not. If it is addressed properly and everybody found a solution for those students in your country, then it is meaningless for you to repeat the same thing. Probably meaningless, or maybe you have to convince people that you are making something new. In other words, novelty. The first one is method, as I said, or benefit, sorry. The second one is novelty. Now, the third one is significance. Significance means, now, what happens if you solve this problem in your country? You try to hypothesize, say, if you use the logic of if I solve this problem, students probably will have better understanding of grammar. Better understanding of a grammar, they apply it in translation. Better translation leads to better job and better opportunities and more satisfied clients. This is the hypothesis of the significance. Without significance, of course, you don't need to make a research at all. You have to prove that this is significant. So significance of research is something hypothetical that you make, something hypothetical about the benefit that you wish to happen in your research. You wish. At the end of the research, you might be frustrated to say, well, I went through that research and I thought it would be significant, but at the end of the day, I did not find any use. And I applied the method and I found that there was no use at all. The same problem happened. Well, this is the best that you can do. It is still a research, it's still accepted as scientific research. You don't have to get a good result because you are neutral, you are honest. This is what happened. You at least prove that the theory doesn't work. This is called a literature review. Now, the theoretical framework, and now I talk about it after we discussed all of these issues. In the theoretical framework, I believe this is my own thought, and probably you can correct me or you can read more about it. The most important thing in the theoretical framework is terminology. Terminology, it is used terms that people would understand. So when you say student, you say, I mean by student, every young man or woman at the age of 20 in the second year of translation department in the year 2022 in specific country or specific university. You say, for example, that I'm going to use the ABC tool. You describe what the ABC tool is and describe it fully so that people will not be confused about what you say. It's very important now for you to use the specific terms all the time. Some people, I find that some people would say, I want now to reduce this. Then I would say, I would decrease it and I would make it less. You cannot use variations of the same term. Whatever you use, it has to be the same. I'm not talking about those simple words like increase or decrease, but I'm talking about some research that I reviewed for some people one day, and I found, and I told them that what happens is that there are key terminology in the same paper or research, and those key terminology I found him or her, I don't remember who was the person was, but anyway, I remember that what happens is that there were changes in the terminology. So today he would say computer the second time, he said no, the laptop, and then he would say the PC, and then he would say the notebook, and other abstract ideas, the same thing. It doesn't work in research. You have to be honest and you have to make the other person understand you. For that reason, if you have a terminology in your research, you have to use it all the time. You cannot say, I'm going to make an intervention and then I am going to do action, and then you refer the same thing as experiment. You have to use the same term. Terminology is very, very important. So your theoretical framework starts with the terminology. Now, what is the theoretical framework about if it's not going to relate it to the literature review? Literature review, as I said, is a critical evaluation of what's happened in the past, and now theoretical framework is what's going to happen in the future. Theoretical framework is looking forward. Literature review is looking backward. The theoretical framework is what are you going to do in order to address this problem, to understand it better, and to apply the solution for this problem. In the theoretical framework, what I do is to solve this problem as I understand, but first of all, understanding it. So the problem that I say is that people have problems in grammar. This is the observation. So in my research, I want to solve this problem. I want students to be good in translation from Arabic into English. And my hypothesis is that their main problem is with the grammar of English, and I need to do something about it. In this example, I will do the following in the theoretical framework. In my theoretical framework, I would say, first of all, I need to understand whether the problem exists or not. And second, I want to see how to solve this problem. Try to understand it. What kind of things that you can do in order to make people understand the problem or try to solve this problem. In my case, and this is the example that I'm giving to you now, I'm thinking about finding a tool. Let's say that there is a book called Building Skills for the TOEFL, or TOEFL as the Americans say, and it provides 10 rules of grammar, and they say that these are the 10 rules that you have to understand in order to pass the TOEFL exam. See how I think now. I'm thinking about it. Can I trust these 10 rules? Can I trust the TOEFL? Can I have it as a criterion? In order to understand this, I have to answer the question, is it tested? And which researcher said that this is a tool which is very good? Which researcher said that this is a very good tool? Has anybody used it before? And how was it used? So these are the questions that you have to understand. Okay, I go to the book and I find the 10 rules. I search in the literature. I found people using it. or probably I didn't find people using it. I have to do extra work now. And in my hypothetical example, I assume that I went to some research to try to understand how the TOEFL happened. And I read in the development of the TOEFL that they developed this tool based on science, based on research, and most importantly, based on the corpus of writing of non-native English speakers over the years that incorporated millions and millions of text. And I read other research, for example, telling me that the tool is verified, the tool is certified, the tool was very good, and the tool was very powerful on all of these descriptive words. So you take it now. I take the tool and I say in my theoretical framework, what I do is that I want, first of all, to understand the problem, why this problem is happening, to understand what the problem is before why it's happening, what the problem is. My impression is that students are very bad in grammar, students of translation. So let's see if I understand it correctly or not. I apply the tool. I bring a test from the grammar components of the 10 rules of the TOEFL, and say what will happen is that I will take it as a guide for me in order to test the students and then to see if they have mistakes in those 10 rules or not. So this is phase number 1. In phase number 2, I want to analyze the results that I have. So in the theoretical framework, as you see, I am trying to apply a theory. I'm trying to apply a theory about solving this problem. The TOEFL, however, the TOEFL tool that I'm talking about is just an instrument or a tool. It is in the methodology. But what is the theory? What is the theory? The theory is about competence in grammar. The theory is about the group of students that I need to address. And I have to find now a theory that's suitable to account for this problem, to explain it more. So the theoretical framework, yes, it has the tool in the method, but basically it has to do also with the theory. With the theory, probably, is it language acquisition, for example? Or is it learning English as a foreign language? What kind of theory do I have? So you see, now the topic that I hypothesized is very promising and is very good, it's very great. And it can be really a research on dissertation level. And I have a tool, which is the TOEFL. The TOEFL 10 rules, they are very good tools and very good rules that have to be addressed. Everything is fine. So let's go ahead with the research. No, you have to specify the theory. What theory are you going to apply encompassing this kind of tool? Is it teaching English as a foreign language? Is it translation theory? For example, you find some theorists in translation studies talking about the grammar approach to translation, for example. You have to use a theory, and that theory has to guide you throughout the theoretical framework. So the theoretical framework is not the same as literature review. It starts with this literature review and try to see not only the works done on the specific phenomena that you want to explain, but also to find a theory, the discipline that's going to guide you forward. For me, I will give you another example because I am not specialized in teaching English as a foreign language. Probably I shouldn't have, from the very beginning, told you about this example. Anyway, it's useful just to find this example and tell you that we are stuck. You got the tool, which is the 10 rules of grammar in the TOEFL. Okay, if you accept it, it's okay, but it's not a theory. It's not a theory. It is just a tool. You have to get a theory. And here I stop with the English language teaching. I'm not specialized in this field. Other people can illuminate you on this. But it's very good to know it. Once again, I repeat, it's very good to know that's what happens with many researchers, including myself, is that we jump into the tool, but we forget that we have to talk about the theory, not the tool. The tool is just in the method. And this is a very big difference between methodology or method and theoretical framework. Now, to make things more understandable, is a research that I did a long time ago about translation phenomenon. I had some problems with the text that was very problematic in translation, and tried to approach it in a way that could solve this problem, and found this is what I thought. I thought that it's highly cultural, and I thought that the only way to address this issue for me at that time, or the way that I would approach it, was not from text linguistics, was not from the coherence, was not from the grammar issues, but from a cultural perspective. So the theory that I used in order to address the translatability of that text was the cultural linguistics field. And in cultural linguistics, I went to ethnolinguistics in particular. So the theory was culture. In other words, I will not look at the text from competence. I'm not going to look at the text as a production that can be translated with specific rules, equivalence, literal translation, free translation, other techniques. I'm not going to discuss this. I'm going to discuss it as a product of an ethno-linguistic community that's going to be received by a different ethno-linguistic community. This is the theory. This is the theoretical framework. I got it from ethnography and ethnolinguistics. I got a list, a tool that is verified and peer-reviewed and published. I took that tool and said I will apply that tool as a method in the analysis and interpretation of the results of my research. So you have a specific text, I repeat, and this text, it is from Arabic into English. It's from English into Arabic, sorry. And I found that I could address it from a cultural perspective, not from a grammar perspective, not from anything else, just culture. I went to ethnolinguistics. This is the theory. I talked about the theory, and then I searched for a tool. I got the tool and applied that tool as a method for getting the results and interpreting those results. We can have other examples in translation. In translation, you can research the equivalence theory. For example, you can see the schools of different schools in translation. You could have some psychological theories in psychology. For example, simultaneous interpreting. You listen and speak at the same time. Are you going to discuss it from a linguistic perspective, or are you going to discuss it from a psychological perspective? If it's psychological perspective, you have to talk about priming, you have to talk about spacing, you have to talk about neuroscience, you have to talk about the, for example, the cognitive load, memory, short-term memory, etc. If you talk about simultaneous interpreting as a linguistic act and about accuracy and other things, you count the words that are there and how people are interacting with those linguistic issues. Free translation, literal translation, this is another issue, and it needs another discipline and another theory to work with. You can talk, for example, about the text. There is a text from translation from Arabic into English or English into Arabic, and you say, I'm going to talk about politeness. So you look for the theories in sociolinguistics and try to see which theory is better for you. If you have a text and you feel that it has certain purposes and they are not met in translation, you can discuss it under pragmatics and try to find theories of pragmatics, like the speech act theories, for example, and those theories that can rule the theoretical framework that you have. With this being said, I think I talked too much. It has been 4 hours so far. I'm sure that what I said could be a bit confusing. I believe that this is what research is sometimes about. However, I tried as much as possible to explain to you what I have in mind and from my experience about research. once again, in order to understand the theoretical framework, it's not a straightforward exercise. I strongly recommend that first of all, you read about philosophy, you read Francis Bacon's Idols of the Mind, and you read something about Aristotle, about the empirical approach, about the logic of Aristotle, and you try to understand casuistry. Before that, it's very difficult going to be for you. You're going to see lots of challenges in understanding what a theoretical framework is. And you have to differentiate between theoretical framework and literature review on the one hand, and you have to differentiate between theoretical framework and method or methodology on the other hand. With this being said, I would like to leave you now. Thank you so much, and I hope that you have got some answers to your questions. If you have more questions and need more clarifications, please put them in the comments. If you have any kind of research proposal that you'd like to discuss, consider just talking to me as a peer reviewer, for example, or as a consultant, and I will be all supportive to your work. Thank you very much for watching. Have a good day. Bye-bye.